Welcome back to the Sideline Sorcerers. It is crazy, but we have gone through 18 weeks of NFL games, and now here we are. It is playoff time. We are going to predict every wild card game, the first round of the NFL playoffs. Unfortunately, Jake could not be with us here today, so I'm going to go ahead, do it alone, and I am actually going to give my thoughts on every over-under, every spread, and obviously pick the winners of each of the 6 games. I usually don't go that crazy, but because there are only 6 games, I was like, you know what? If I pick and cherry pick the ones that I want to bet, I'll end up probably screwing myself. It's probably just best if I do them all and then see kind of what comes through and sticks, right? So we're going to get right into it here with the Chargers at the Texans. I believe this game is Saturday afternoonish, and I have to go with the Chargers. I think that Vegas knows they're favored by 2.5, 3 points here. The Texans, Houston, they have just not been as good as they were last year, where, they went to the playoffs really hot. They did win that playoff game at home against the Browns. Here they are in a similar position, the 4 seed, hosting the 5 seed, and I think they actually lose this game. I think the Chargers are well more balanced. I think they're better coached, and they have an experienced quarterback who has gone into the playoffs and had a 28-point lead against the Jaguars. And while he went on to lose that game, I think it'll help him in this moment here. I think it should be a good game, but I am going to take the Chargers here. Then you got Pittsburgh at Baltimore, so the third meeting between these teams, obviously division rivalries, which is why we're now getting a third meeting. I'm going to take Baltimore. I don't really think there will be that many people taking Pittsburgh, just based on how these teams have diverged ever since that first meeting between the two when Pittsburgh won. Now, I know Pittsburgh won a few nice games after they beat the Ravens, but I think they ended the season losing 3 games in a row, and they're all actually maybe was 4. They're all very important games. They lost to the Ravens, the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Bengals, I think, to end the season. Those are, pivotal. Those are the types of teams that you're obviously going to see in the playoffs, and yet the offense has crumbled. The defense has not played quite as well, and so I think Baltimore is the pick here, especially because they're at home, and that whole thing that I used to say, the whole trend pattern that betting Mike Tomlin as an underdog, not only is a good decision straight up, but against the spread, he hits it above 60%, and yet he is not hit, not even really. Well, I guess they did cover. Okay, they covered against the Bengals because it was a 2.5-point spread. They lost by 2. But generally, that trend has not been hitting these last few weeks. So I don't want to really even. It's a tough one. We're gonna get to my spread bets, obviously, but picking Pittsburgh to cover any spread right now is, tough sledding. Then you have Denver at Buffalo, so I think this is now Sunday morning here, or Sunday afternoon. I'm going to roll with the Bills here. I think 9 points maybe is a little much, but rookie quarterback going on the road for his first playoff start is not a great recipe for success, although I do think Jaden Daniels will actually get a win in that same scenario, but I just think Denver, they had a cupcake game against the Chiefs backups, but all in all, their defense has been crumbling. Like I said, kind of like, Pittsburgh offensively, defensively for the Broncos, they just have not been as good as they were initially. Now, take that Chiefs game out of it. They gave up a ton of points against the Bengals. They gave up a ton of points against the Chargers. They gave up a ton of points against the Browns and needed basically 2 pick sixes to win that game. So I like the Bills here, but I think I like the Broncos to cover. Then we got Green Bay at Philadelphia. I'm going to take the Eagles. I feel like both these teams kind of similar. A lot of these teams, they've just gone in different directions. A few weeks ago, I really thought Green Bay could have made a run in the postseason. But, see here how they fell to the 7 seed after losing to the Bears. Christian Watson is out for the rest of the season. Jordan Love's a little banged up. These teams already played in Brazil in week 1, and while it's hard to beat a team twice in the same season, I think the Eagles have gotten better since then because, you look back on that part of the season, the Eagles barely beat the Packers. I think they were actually down in that game a lot. They went on to lose to the Bucs. They barely beat the Saints, but now, they are an absolute juggernaut. Saquon Barkley playing out of his mind. Jalen Hurts banged up a little bit, but I think he'll be able to do just enough to win this game. I actually do like them to cover that 5.5-point spread as well. Staying in the NFC here, you got Washington at Tampa Bay. And again, you have a rookie quarterback making his first playoff start on the road. And also you have a franchise that historically is not well versed in playoff experience. The last time they made the playoffs was in 2020, and they were actually at home hosting the Buccaneers. That's when Tom Brady went on to win the Super Bowl, and that was actually the year that they went like 7-9, but the division was so bad that they still won that division by a whole game or two. That was wild. That is an absolute wild statement. And I think that actually goes to show that we might need to take a look in restructuring the playoffs here a little bit. With Minnesota being like the flip side of that, they're losing their division having won 14 games, right? So you can win your division with only 7 games sometimes. You could also lose your division sometimes by winning 14 games, and it significantly impacts the seeding and whether you get a home or a road playoff game. And it kind of comes back to the college football idea of we have so many more objective metrics in the NFL. Like everything is predetermined. Like who's going to make the playoffs, and there's no arguing who should be in and who should be out. But maybe there should be, or I feel like this reminds me so much so of how college football has been so controversial in terms of the teams that made the playoffs and then where they have been seeded, and how Oregon, for example, got such a rough draw, whereas Penn State, who lost the Big Ten championship, got a much easier path, and we're seeing that play out here in live time. I think there are some similarities to how, the divisions work here. I think it's almost the exact same thing. You got, some teams like Boise State and Arizona State getting byes when they probably didn't deserve it. And you have now teams like the Buccaneers and the Rams getting home playoff games over Minnesota when they, probably don't deserve it, right? So there's a lot of similarities there, in my opinion. I think that's an interesting conversation. But I'm taking the Commanders here. I just think they're more explosive. I think the Bucs are so up and down. You lose to the Cowboys. You struggle with the Panthers in overtime. You struggle so poorly in this must-win game here against the Saints until the final quarter and a half. I don't know. I like the Commanders here. I think that they will actually be able to go in and get a dub in Tampa. And then Minnesota at Los Angeles. I'm going to take Minnesota here to bounce back and get the win again. This is a team. This was one of the only 2 teams. Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's correct. One of the only 2 teams to beat Minnesota, the other being Detroit, and, both losses besides this one coming to Detroit, right? So that really does tell me statistically that it was an anomaly that the Rams won this game to begin with, and that a rematch really should favor Minnesota, despite how atrociously abysmal Sam Darnold was in that game against Detroit. So I am going to take the Vikings. I'm going to buy into them here again and give them, this win after a week in which they look just so flat offensively in a game that was so pivotal. They could have flipped this entire playoff by being at home, having that bye. That game was just the stakes in that game are unbelievable. It's not like you're just battling between the 6 and the 5 seed, like, Washington and Green Bay flipped because one won, one lost. And this, it's just man, the 1 seed is so significant, and it really didn't look like Minnesota was prepared for that game. But like I said, I'm going to believe in them. I'm going to take them here to win that game. So I have just one upset, being Washington over Tampa Bay. Now, Jake has all of the same picks, except he is also taking the upset of the Rams over Minnesota, which is very fair. I think a lot of people will go that way because of the recent performance that we have here to judge Minnesota off of. But for the Rams to sweep Minnesota in the same season really just doesn't sound right to me. So I like the Vikings and I like the Commanders there. And yeah, that Vikings game is actually on Monday night. That is a Monday night playoff game. And now to pick the spread and the over-under in all these games here, let's go. They're a little out of order. I apologize about that. But I was, mad scientisting this whole thing, trying to figure out what the right sides were. And, picking these games so early in advance is always so difficult. But I'm going to try my best here. So we're going to start with the Washington-Tampa Bay game. I like Washington, obviously, +3. I also like the over in that game. I mean, both of these defenses have struggled over the last few weeks. I mean, Washington gave up a fair amount of points to the Cowboys and Trey Lance. They almost actually lost that game. Marcus Mariota played very well, by the way. So I like the over here, over 50.5. Denver, Buffalo. I like Denver +9. I also like the over in that game. I kind of like some overs this week, which is, surprising for playoff football. Usually you want to take unders, but these are some big numbers. So, I mean, yeah, probably not smart, but I like the over. I also like Philadelphia to cover, so that's my first favorite here covering. I like the under, though, in that game just because I think Green Bay offensively is going to be a little less potent with, Jordan Love a little banged up and Christian Watson now. Jalen Hurts also a little banged up, so the under feels like the play there. Chargers, Houston, I like the over 43. It's actually 42.5 now, so you get yourself an extra half point. I'm going to take the Chargers -3. I'm also going to take Baltimore. This is so tough. Yeah, I'm going to take Baltimore -9.5. They just have not, the Steelers have not shown that they could do anything these last few weeks. So I have to go with the Ravens there to cover. And I am going to actually take the over 43.5 in that game, though. I think that's also a pretty low over-under total, and the weather doesn't look too bad, at least right now. And then last but not least, the Minnesota Rams game. I'm going to take Minnesota -2 and then the under 47. I feel the best about those two picks than I do really any of these other ones. Like, I really like Minnesota -2. I really do like the under in that game, especially after what we saw from Minnesota offensively against the Lions. So that is all I have for you guys in this episode of the Sideline Sorcerers. A little short, but nice and sweet. Give you guys my picks and predictions. Take them for what you will. And we apologize there was no episode last week, but I got really sick. Jake was really busy. I was also traveling. Went down to see my Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, which was awesome, obviously. And yeah, in terms of college football, I would take Ohio State to cover for sure. I'm not going to even touch on the Notre Dame-Penn State game. It's just too emotional. But I do like Ohio State to win and probably win the whole thing. But I will see you guys next week. Hopefully Jake will be here too.